During the Dune Part 2 press tour, Josh Brolin mentioned that he hated the Jonah Hex movie in which he starred. Yes, that's right. For those of you who didn't know, DC released a Jonah Hex movie on June 17th, 2010, starring Josh Brolin. Now, being the curious person that I am, I had to find out why he hated this movie so much. Not only to answer my curiosity, but to add it to my list of terrible superhero movies that I've discussed on my channel, and to find out what was so bad about this Jonah Hex movie for every other person who wasn't going to watch it themselves. What can I say? I'm a man of the people. Funnily enough, just like the people who happened to see this movie in theaters, which wasn't much considering Jonah Hex was a massive flop and grossed $11 million during its box office run, I didn't know a single thing about Jonah Hex before watching this movie. To be blunt, the only thing I knew about Jonah Hex was that he was a cowboy in the DC universe. That's it. As sad as it is to say, watching this movie was the most I've ever been exposed to Jonah Hex, and I say that as someone who grew up watching a majority of the popular and loved animated superhero shows we all grew up with. Unfortunately though, after watching this movie, I can easily state that I now see why Josh Brolin hates this movie. Jonah Hex isn't a good movie at all. To be honest, Jonah Hex is terrible. I dislike this movie so much that it's on my very short list of superhero movies that are straight up not enjoyable. This means that no, Jonah Hex isn't on the same level as other infamously bad superhero movies like Batman and Robin, Catwoman, Green Lantern, Steel, or Morbius. You know, the type of movies that are so bad they're kind of good in a way because you can laugh at them or because you enjoy how ridiculous those movies are. Jonah Hex is the worst type of bad. It's the type of bad that makes you regret watching it. It's the type of bad that angers you to the point where it leaves a bad taste in your mouth, kind of like Madam Web did recently. The best way for me to describe Jonah Hex is bland. Jonah Hex is an incredibly frustrating but bland movie with a far too ambitious plot that would have been much better off being more focused. Beyond the poorly written story, terrible pacing, awful villain, and unnecessary amount of explosions, what makes Jonah Hex such a bad movie is that despite having such a star-studded cast, almost no one in this movie feels like they're putting in any effort. It almost feels like everyone involved with this film knew or realized that it was bad while filming it, and they all collectively agreed to say screw it, let's just get the paycheck and move on as quickly as possible. That might sound dramatic, but you think a movie that stars Josh Brolin, Megan Fox, Will Arnett, Michael Shannon, Lance Reddick, and John Malkovich would at least have some redeeming qualities, but there aren't any. That's how bad Jonah Hex is. I'm more than aware that this is going to sound dramatic and ridiculously harsh, but Jonah Hex is one of the only movies I've ever watched for a video on this channel where I realized how pointless this movie was while I was actively watching. In the middle of watching this movie, I legitimately had to pause it because I thought to myself, wow, not only does this movie suck, but this movie might be one of the worst superhero movies I've ever watched because it accomplishes absolutely nothing with its 1 hour and 21 minute runtime. The writing is bad, the characters suck, the acting is horrendous, the CGI/practical effects are hard to appreciate when they're constantly using explosions to transition between scenes, and honestly, you feel absolutely nothing towards anyone in this movie. There's not a single moment of this movie that truly makes you feel for a character or be concerned for the outcome of this movie because you can figure out what's going to happen in this movie within the first 10 minutes of this film. On top of all of those problems, this Jonah Hex movie fails to capitalize on every big set piece or action moment that should have easily stuck the landing. Like when Jonah rides his horse and uses machine guns that are somehow attached to the horse to kill people at the beginning of the movie. Yes, that legitimately happens in this movie, and yes, it somehow sucks. A character riding a horse with machine guns somehow manages to not be cool. How? I don't know, but I'm being dead serious when I say that it's just not as cool as it should be. However, I guess the lack of flair can apply to the whole movie thanks to how awful this movie is when it comes to handling its story. Considering I'm more than confident that everyone who's going to watch this video probably hasn't seen or isn't going to watch this movie, here's the simplest breakdown of the story to not waste your time. Jonah Hex is a bounty hunter, and at the beginning of the movie, he kills Jeb Turnbull. This decision backfires as Quentin Turnbull, the main villain of this terrible movie, and Jeb Turnbull's father, hunts down Jonah Hex for killing his son Jeb. Quentin captures Jonah, kills Jonah's family in front of Jonah, brands Jonah's face, and then disappears as he leaves Jonah to die. Jonah, however, doesn't die as he's saved by this group of people called the Crow People. The Crow People aren't explained all that well, but what you need to know is that thanks to them, Jonah can now speak to the dead and talk to crows. Quentin Turnbull, on the other hand, fades away into obscurity, making Jonah and the rest of the world assume that Quentin Turnbull died years later. After this movie makes it a point to tell us that Turnbull dies, the movie breaks any level of suspense and reveals that Turnbull didn't die. If you think I'm lying, just minutes after Jonah states that he believed Turnbull died in a fire, the movie reveals that Turnbull was alive all along. It's so stupid. It should have just been a predictable plot twist in the end, but I digress. Jonah finds out about Turnbull being alive after Turnbull blows up a train for the sake of getting information on these weapons that will allow him to destroy the world for, well, unknown reasons. He just wants to blow the world up. He's a villain in the early 2000s. I don't know, man. Maybe I shouldn't have expected something this generic out of this movie. When Turnbull reveals to the world that he's alive, this other group of people hunt Jonah down and find him with Megan Fox, who plays Lila, the cliche love interest choice. Jonah immediately decides it's his job to hunt down Turnbull to get revenge, not to stop him from destroying the world. Jonah then spends the majority of this movie riding his horse and chasing Turnbull. Jonah, again, almost dies after a fight with Turnbull's henchmen, but is healed by the Crow People yet again, and this movie switches its pace immediately after that because it realizes it's almost time for it to end. After being revived by the Crow People for the second time, Jonah becomes filled with rage and blindly hunts down Turnbull for the final time. Jonah and Turnbull finally face off. It's revealed that Turnbull predictably kidnapped Megan Fox. I say predictably because this movie goes out of its way to reveal this decision, as well as Jonah Hex says, "Everybody around me always dies," to Megan Fox's character at the beginning of the movie. In the most anticlimactic way possible, the fight ends with Megan Fox pushing a shotgun down a hole as she tries to save herself from Turnbull's henchmen who are about to kill her. It falls to Jonah's hand, which allows Jonah to finally kill Turnbull along with the rest of his henchmen. The movie ends with Jonah saving Megan Fox's character and him being asked to team up with the generic, unimportant supporting cast of characters that found out about Turnbull being alive and put him on this mission to begin with. Jonah decides to decline their offer because having bosses is not his style, and he walks off into the sunset with Megan Fox. Oh, by the way, did I mention that the world-destroying items that Turnbull was looking for were fake-looking Dragon Balls? Yes, they were fake Dragon Balls. Don't believe me? Here's an image of the world-destroying items and the Dragon Balls side by side. See? Fake Dragon Balls. Now that I recap this movie for everybody, firstly, yes, it's as boring as it sounds. Secondly, yes, it's as bad as it sounds. Thirdly, I have to ask a couple of questions that need to be asked, even if we might never get the answers to them. Honestly, who was this movie even for? What made WB think that out of all of their characters in the DC universe, people wanted a Jonah Hex movie back in the early 2000s? What purpose did this movie serve? Why did they not just make an immediate sequel to Constantine or Superman Returns instead of this movie? Sure, Superman Returns was kind of mediocre, but a sequel could have easily fixed all of the problems with that movie. Brandon Routh was not the problem with Superman Returns. Constantine getting an immediate sequel might have been a bit of a risk. However, taking that risk was far more worth it than this Jonah Hex movie. Jonah Hex is so terrible that it legitimately fails every single way it possibly could have failed. It didn't successfully implement any of its supernatural elements or themes like Constantine did multiple years before Jonah Hex released in 2005. And I say that despite Jonah Hex using his ability to talk to the dead that he got from being healed by the Crow people in this movie twice. Yes, that's right. Watching Jonah use the supernatural ability that allows him to talk to the dead somehow managed to be underwhelming. And not only that, it was also heavily underused. The only time it works is when Jonah uses it to talk to Jeb Turnbull to try and get clues as to where Quentin Turnbull is, and that scene only works due to Jeb bringing arguably the only set of understandable emotions to an otherwise one-dimensional movie after he highlights how Jonah and his father are not so far off from one another. Outside of that, Jonah only uses this ability one other time, and the movie forgets that he can do that. You'd think he'd constantly use that ability throughout the movie to maintain that supernatural theme of the movie from start to finish, and to help maintain a mystery angle of the movie since Jonah is trying to hunt down Turnbull. This movie doesn't even try to, but fails to do that positively. If it at least tried, I would have been able to give it credit for trying. I would have been able to sit here and say things like, you know, this movie tried to do a lot of interesting things that failed to stick the landing, but at least we can say they tried. That's what matters the most. They tried. However, that's unfortunately not the case with Jonah Hex. It's one weird decision after another with this movie, and all of it culminates into a movie that is not worth watching at all. It's not so bad that it's good, and it's not so bad that you have to watch it due to your morbid curiosity. Honestly, Jonah Hex is one of the worst movies I've ever sat through. I wish I could be far more forgiving towards this movie, but I truly can't given the amount of stupid decisions this movie makes. For instance, one of the most head-scratching decisions in Jonah Hex is that this movie makes it a point to make Jonah getting his crossbow pistols feel like a pivotal moment. Jonah is given to them by another character who isn't all that important, and it's this moment that makes you think, oh, he's about to use these crossbow pistols to go on a rampage rather than just using a shotgun for the rest of the movie as he attempts to get his revenge on Turnbull. But instead, he only uses them in a single fight against random henchmen. That's right, Jonah only uses those crossbow pistols once. Once, not twice, not 3 times, once. After that, Jonah, for whatever reason, purposely throws them to the ground and walks away. And guess what? For the rest of the movie, he pretends that they don't exist or that he couldn't keep those crossbow pistols. Jonah could have, you know, just kept them and spent time figuring out how to reload them one way or another so that way he could have them on him for the rest of the movie. Instead, they're never mentioned ever again, despite this movie actively going out of its way to show them off to the viewer. Who thought this was a great idea? These are the same crossbow pistols that, mind you, are shown off with epic music and get hyped up as if they're the key to Jonah's success, and like these weapons are going to allow Jonah to destroy the world-destroying items that Turnbull has possession, given that they can fly wherever Turnbull wants them to fly to. You'd think that this movie would have had a dope scene of Jonah shooting at them with the pistols to blow them up, given how many explosions there are in this movie, but nope, that's too ambitious for this terrible movie. To explain to you how dumb this decision is, here's a perfect example. This creative decision is almost like if Marvel decided after years of anticipation to make Captain America wield Mjolnir in Avengers Endgame, but as soon as he picks it up, he looks at Mjolnir, throws it back down and says, nah, I'ma do my own thing, and chooses to use his shield in the final fight against Thanos in Avengers Endgame instead of continuing to use Mjolnir. That's the type of logic this Jonah Hex movie operates on. If you couldn't tell by now, yes, this movie failed to get the most important job done, and that's selling one of the more obscure comic book characters to the casual audience. We're not talking about a movie centered around Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, Iron Man, or the Incredible Hulk. You know, superhero characters that the casual audience was already familiar with by the time this movie was released. We're talking about Jonah Hex, a comic book character almost no one within the casual audience cared about then or cares about now. What this Jonah Hex movie needed to do was follow in the footsteps of the Keanu Reeves Constantine movie, which came out in 2005. That's 5 full years of being able to study a relatively successful movie. For those of you who didn't watch the Keanu Reeves Constantine movie, unlike Jonah Hex, Constantine is one of the more underappreciated comic book movies. Constantine is a very engaging movie that was incredibly different from all of the superhero movies in the early 2000s, and is honestly different from any of the superhero movies today. Firstly, it's a rated R comic book movie, which was unheard of at the time of its release, and it leans heavily into its magical elements, which wasn't common for comic book movies either. Despite that though, Constantine managed to not only have fantastic world building, but also a well-written story, a protagonist worth caring about, and a supporting cast of characters that were legitimately integral to the movie's plot. From the first scene of Constantine, which is John Constantine doing an exorcism, you know you're in for an insanely wild ride. That tone that's immediately set from those first moments of Constantine allows the viewers to grasp what they're in for. It also allows the viewers to understand just how flawed and complex John Constantine is in that movie. In the most blunt way possible, the movie makes you realize that while Constantine comes off as this effortlessly cool and mellow character, you really shouldn't like him for a multitude of reasons. You shouldn't care about him or his health for that matter, considering he's told a million times to not smoke anymore and he still does it anyway. Even then, you still can't help but to enjoy him and his journey throughout the movie, thanks to the movie's writing and Keanu's acting. What I'm trying to say here is that there's a crystal clear effort that was put into that Constantine movie, and such an effort is what made the movie work. You can tell that everyone involved with that movie understood the assignment that comes with making a movie about such an uncommon character. They understood that if they wanted the Constantine movie to be successful by any stretch of the imagination, they needed to carefully craft a movie that didn't fail to do more than the bare minimum. They needed to create a film that had a world that felt lived in. The movie needed to immediately set a tone that allows viewers to understand what type of person Constantine is in that movie. And they needed a supporting cast of characters that constantly kept the viewers on their toes as the story progresses. And believe it or not, they accomplished doing all of that. All of that time, love, and effort put into making Constantine was worth it. That effort is what allowed Constantine to become a cult classic movie. Jonah Hex, on the other hand, is what a movie looks like when little to no effort is put into its creation. One of the most important things about Jonah Hex is the origin story of what happened to his messed up face. You know, the face that's incredibly hard to ignore in the movie's poster, in the movie itself, or the comics as well. Do you want to know how this movie goes about telling the origin story of his face? If this doesn't tell you the lack of effort that went into this movie, I don't know what will. The movie shows Jonah's face burned at the beginning of the movie by Turnbull, and about 20 or 30 minutes into the movie, Jonah rides his horse to a small lake. He stops to get water, looks at the water, and it unexpectedly flashes back to Jonah staring at an axe. As Jonah stares at the axe, he moves it closer to his face, and it fades back into the modern timeline of the movie. It's not explained with dialogue, it's not shown in a heavily CGI'd scene, it's just teased. If this movie had been rated R, which it should have been for what it's worth, they could have at least tried to show it happen to truly emphasize just how messed up Jonah is. Most people were going into the movie thinking that getting his face burned was the result of some bad accident. That's kind of par for the course with the superhero movies around that time. Now imagine being those people and getting shocked by the movie as it's revealed to them that it was his own decision early on in the movie. Imagine the viewers getting shown this, or at least having it teased with timely cutaways with a voiceover narration by Jonah explaining the pain he went through and why he did it. That would have set an immediate tone for this movie, just like the exorcism scene in Constantine, and it would have made the choice of being an R-rated movie legitimately worth it. Instead, we got this atrocity of a movie. Without any hesitation, I can say that Jonah Hex is one of the worst comic book movies ever made, and one of the worst comic book movies I've ever watched. It's so bad that it's on the same tier as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, and for those of you who don't know how bad it is for me to say that, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 is still the only movie I've ever watched for a video on this channel that I legitimately hate with a passion. I truly don't blame the casual audience for not running out to go see this movie when it came out. After a Constantine movie and Superman Returns, the last thing anyone could have ever wanted is a Jonah Hex movie. Plus, this Jonah Hex movie didn't deserve people's time or money. Part of me honestly wishes this movie made even less than $11 million at the box office. It didn't deserve to hit a double-digit box office number, for being truthful here. That's how much I dislike Jonah Hex. Josh Brolin is right. This movie is trash. It sucks. It's not good. It's a boring movie about a seemingly interesting comic book character who deserved better than this terrible final product of a movie. Was making a movie about Jonah Hex a bold choice? Sure, I can fully admit that. However, I can't give that bold choice any credit at all. If you're going to make the decision of making a movie about a comic book character almost nobody cares about without setting this movie up properly by putting that character in another movie as a supporting character before their movie releases, then an argument could be made that this movie should have never been made to begin with. You can't expect to get credit for making a bold choice without doing every single thing possible to ensure that an obscure comic book character like Jonah Hex got the proper treatment and the audiences at least knew of his existence before he got a movie. That way, he wasn't set up for what is a blatant failure and tutorial on what to not do with obscure characters in a now saturated movie genre. The only positive thing this Jonah Hex movie managed to achieve was making me want to rewatch Keanu Reeves' Constantine movie. So you know what? I think I might go do exactly that.